Hey, welcome to episode 5 of the podcast Dev.Sec.Lead. My name is Wilson Bautista Jr., and I'm your host. From the day that we were born, we were influenced by the people that were around us. Subconsciously, they helped shape the good habits and may have influenced some of the bad ones. How? By their words, actions, and the example they set for themselves as well as for us. These were our first mentors, our parents, our grandparents, teachers, even our friends. Now, we are out in the professional world and learning the operational rhythm of our organizations. Now, we'll always have our colleagues and our bosses, but every now and again, we're going to need to be able to talk to somebody about things that we need to do in order to improve ourselves. We're going to need a mentor. Someone who's experienced in a specific area to help guide us to where we need to go. We're also going to need that someone who will tell us that we're on the right path, or the one that will tell us that we'll probably think twice about making that decision. It goes both ways though, because if we are seasoned professionals and have a team, people are going to look at us for our guidance and our expertise. However, we don't go around asking people, will you be my mentor? Or, hi, I'm a supervisor, so I'm going to mentor you. Because quite honestly, that's a bit awkward. So what do we do? For me, as someone who's looking to get mentored, I want to find somebody who I respect as a person. Basically, someone I'd like to have a beer with. 2, I want this person to be somebody that I respect as a professional. 3, they're going to need to tell me what I need to hear rather than what I want to hear. It also goes the same for being a mentor for others. I want you to be respectful to me as a person. I want you to respect me as a professional, but also that you're going to be willing to hear the good things, but also hear the harsh realities if need be. Because life isn't going to be rainbows and unicorns, folks. For those that I've mentored before, they know that if they ask me for my opinion, I'll be tactful, respectful, and brutally honest. So who better to bring on the show than one of my mentors in cybersecurity? This week I have David Gallagher, and we first met in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'd recently transferred from the Marine Corps Reserve to the Army National Guard, and we were both part of the North Carolina Cyber Network Defense Team. What made it a perfect match was that he was also a Marine, and he transferred to the Army National Guard after his active duty service as well. For those of you who do not know the difference between active duty service and reserve service, active duty means that you were a full-time employee of the military. Reserves meant that you were a part-time employee of the military, meaning 1 week in a month and 2 weeks in the summer. So, we had our similar military backgrounds, and we were both working some aspect of cybersecurity in our daily civilian jobs. We immediately hit it off. I hope you enjoy this week's episode. So, I've got David Gallagher here. He's from Cisco. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Great. So, I wanted to bring you on because you're a good friend of mine, and when I first got to the National Guard, you were one of the only Marines that was actually in my section, so it was really nice to have somebody there that kind of knows what it's like being a Marine. So when you're with a new unit, especially in an Army unit, you don't really know the Army culture very well. So looking to you for mentorship was great, and especially with all of your experience in the field, it was always a refresher to see that I'm not the only one that's struggling with professional things and dealing with stakeholders as well. So thanks a lot for coming onto the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Will. And we'll just add that from the moment that you joined the National Guard, you made it an immediate impression. You set yourself apart, distinguished yourself from everyone else. So I think there was just a natural gravitation.
Thanks, I appreciate that. So you're at Cisco right now. I know that you started your career a long time ago. So can you tell our listeners, like, where have you come from? What have you done? I mean, you've done startups. Now you're at this, pretty well-known networking company. So yeah, let us know. Sure.
I was in the Marines. I got out in 1987, so I was in from 83 to 87. I then joined IBM in 1989 after a short stint as an electrical apprentice, where I got my electrician's license. But while I was doing that apprenticeship, someone that I consider to this day a friend and a mentor hired me at IBM in 1989, so 30 years ago. From there, I did manufacturing of mainframes, design of mainframes, consolidated help desk, where they, supported everything from mainframes to meat scales and everything in between. And I did that for 22 years. The .com boom, I was doing web hosting and web hosting architecture. And so that was my career at IBM. That spanned 22 years. And then in 2013, I had an opportunity to join a company. I was recruited by someone that I admire very much, and he sought me for what he saw in me or my skills, and convinced me to join Landcope. And from there, I worked with Landcope as a startup, and worked there until they were acquired by Cisco in 2016. And now I'm a manager of network consulting engineers and architects for the customer success organization.
So what does that mean exactly?
Well, so customer success has a range of products, services, and offerings, everything Cisco, including security. My particular role is managing the network consulting engineers and architects for StealthWatch, which was the Landcope product prior to the acquisition. Mm-hmm. And we, if you don't know, StealthWatch is a NetFlow security tool, and it uses NetFlow from any devices that generate it, and they can parse information relative to network operations or security operations from those NetFlow attribute fields. It's a pretty good tool, pretty powerful.
So you were with Landcope when it was a startup. How is that environment? I know we had talked about it, but there's a lot of folks, probably in California that are working on startups as well. But you have a lot of graduates and students that may want to jump into this field. What can you expect from a startup and the life?
Well, that's actually a very good question, because to leave the security of a company that I had worked for 22 years to something that was less certain, I had to figure out what was going to drive me, or what was going to be interesting. I can tell you there's an excitement around a startup that's different than larger companies. I was employee number 250, and I was a lot closer to the top. I felt like my voice was heard more. I felt I was more directly aligned with the successes, and my contributions were more recognized. So that was the immediate thing that I noticed. Instead of being 5 or 6 layers deep in a management tree, a company like IBM, I literally was a door away from the guy at the top. So it was a fantastic structure, and it was very lean. Everybody's coalesced around success, and we all celebrated those successes together. It was very exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that a lot of startups, they fail, and that's like one of the main risks that you have to think of when you're starting to look at employee opportunities, especially in Silicon Valley and now Austin, Texas. What were some of the things that you were looking at to make that move from being like at Big Blue and you had everything taken care of for you to something that has a high probability of failing?
Well, a couple of things. I looked at who was running it, who was the CEO at the time. And when I did the research, I found it was a gentleman that was had done this before. He had taken companies from various stages of startup and funding and brought them either public or to acquisition. So I figured he knew what he was doing. The other thing is you look at who's supporting the venture, where's the money coming from. And those were pretty good guideposts for me. When I started seeing the history of the CEO, the folks that had done this before who were funding this, as well as the management and who they were recruiting, folks that I had known in the tech field that I admired and respected were being brought on. I thought those are pretty good indicators.
That's great. Yeah, it's always interesting to talk to folks that have been in that startup space. I've heard a lot of horror stories, but yours is one of those stories that I've heard that ended in a positive note, getting acquired by Cisco. And is that similar to working for IBM? They're such a huge global company.
Well, with IBM, the thing that I could say, first of all, it gave me a good life. It was very good from some of the gentlemen that hired me through 22 years, and I watched it change for the good and for the bad. At one point, they were very focused on the employees, and they thought of them as the most valuable asset to the company, and somewhere along the line that changed a little bit. And this was but again, I wouldn't ever say anything bad. Again, it gave me a good life. I had learned everything that I had learned technically through all of the challenges and all the opportunities that I had at IBM. I had great managers and mentors, and I owe a lot of my success to that time at IBM.
Mm-hmm. So with working with Cisco, is it a lot different, the culture? And I mean, you've been there after the acquisition of Landcope. I mean,
it's different. Yeah, it's clearly different than Landcope culture, but it's still very good culture. I am definitely enjoying my work at Cisco. I've had opportunities. I see a company that has not just tried to erase that culture that was built in the startup phase. They've tried to preserve it. In fact, they've expanded it through their marketing and sales reach and some of the extraordinary talent that they have there that kind of drives our product improvements and roadmaps.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, great. So the topics that I kind of wanted to talk about was really the focus on the mentorship aspect. And I've had a few military guests here, and we've talked about leadership development, especially when it comes to leading your troops. And and as a Marine and as a soldier, we understand that leading from the front is a big deal. Leading by example is even a bigger deal. But some of those military lessons aren't really translated over to the civilian sector very well. What are some of those things that you've learned in the military in your time that we can teach those who are not military oriented to improve their mentorship skills?
Well, you pick a style of leadership. I do appreciate the leadership by example. One of my first mentors in the professional or technology field was somebody who led that way, and I admired him greatly for it. So I think you pick a style of leadership that kind of aligns with you or identifies with you. I mean, most people don't like the authoritarian style of leadership, for example, or persuasive. But you pick a leadership style that aligns with you best. I think is the key.
Mm-hmm. And so, what leadership style aligns with you the best?
It is a leadership by example. The person will step out there and lead and do it, and mentor those folks and teach them in the same way, right? That's the one that resonates with me most.
Well, how does one go about and actually find a mentor? I mean, you don't go up to somebody and say, "Hey, I think your leadership style is similar to what I would like to be like. So, would you mind spending some time and being my mentor?"
Yeah, I think if you ask me, all of my mentoring opportunities have been sort of just this natural, relationship that develops at a professional level. You just gravitate towards each other. Maybe it's they see something in you and you see something in them, and it's just a natural alignment. That's always the way it's happened with me.
Has it always been from a technical standpoint or from different standpoints?
Well, I think different standpoints. I've had some in the military, most of them obviously, because the majority of my life and career has been in the private sector. But I think it's a bunch of things. I think both in the military and in the private sector. I've had some at IBM. My very first manager that hired me in 1989 had an extraordinary influence on me. Just the pride he took in his work and to being an IBMer and the level of professionalism that he displayed. It was just carried through the whole team. Mm-hmm. They just wanted to work for this guy. And even to this day, when I talk to folks that I know that worked with him back in, his name is always brought up. He was that much of an impact as a leader and a manager.
So, I mean, what made him have that impact? Was he constantly around people, or was it that he was hand in hand with folks, or was he just always visible and accessible?
He had a genuine sincerity. I mean, he really cared about people, and he had a great amount of pride for the work that he did in the company that he worked for. And again, for me, this was my first job outside of the military and the trades where, it was wingtips and white shirts, but but I was, it was a daunting change for what I had done in the uniform side to join the storied history of a company like IBM, and it just, I thought there'd be a whole lot of expectations. So maybe in essence, I was probably looking for someone to make that transition easier. That's as I look back now, I think that's what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a lot of folks that listen to the show, and they want to be the future leaders of cybersecurity, and a lot of it, a lot of the things that I see are, hey, you want to be a technical expert. You want to be, the best at Linux, or the best at pen testing, or the best at social engineering, or something. But what I see, and I'm not sure if you agree with me, is that maybe we're struggling with personal leadership, or just leadership in general when it comes to soft skills. What do you think?
Well, I definitely agree with that. First of all, the workspace and work environment is more separated and segmented than it ever has been. People working remotely, people working in very specialized, verticals within an organization. That I think that contributes to it. And I manage a team that's kind of geographically dispersed, and that's the one thing that I won't say struggle with, but I always try to do better at making sure they don't feel like they're that far away from the core of the team,
mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But to your point, I agree, but I'm not sure how that's evolved, maybe just because the workplace in itself has evolved.
So it's interesting that you talked about remote work, being in IBM and especially being in Cisco. You're in this global organization, and you've already said that you have remote teams. And I think it's difficult when you have so many people that are spread across the world to have that face-to-face conversation, because there's a lot of communication channels that you're missing. Especially like if you're reading an email, you don't get the verbal cues and the nonverbal cues. You just get an email and it's left to your interpretation. So what are some of the strategies that you use to, talk to your team as a manager and say, hey, I'm here for you, and if you need anything, let me know.
So I do a couple of things. I have a team meeting, the whole team, for whoever's not on the road, once every other week. And then every other week, I also have individual one-on-ones with the team. And it's their time. Discussions can talk about hobbies to, the work they've done or their aspirations. So that one-on-one time to me is critical. And I learned that from a guy that I can, consider a mentor to me. And I picked that up in his style of leadership and the way he ran a team. And I find it extremely beneficial and almost essential to running a team that's kind of dispersed on in different time zones and in different states and things like that. So that's one of the things. And then we bring the team together once or twice a year in some place where we talk about the state of the business. We talk about the roadmap, and we have different parts of the business come and speak to the team so they don't feel so like they're in their own little tower of things. So we do that either once or twice a year where we just have a team meeting on site somewhere.
Yeah, one-on-ones are, I think, always a good win for people. We have a lot of folks out there that are natural introverts, and maybe don't like talking to their boss on a weekly basis. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it could be very difficult to talk to people on one-on-one because they might get uncomfortable. How do you break that? How do you break that uncomfortability? It's not going to happen overnight, but what are some of your strategies?
I honestly, it's that one-on-one time I call it their time. Seriously, this is, I turn off my cell phone, I turn off all the distraction, and it's my time with them. And it can take, like I said, there's no guidelines, right? If you want to talk about business, we can talk about business. If you want to talk about your hobbies or skiing or travel, I'm happy to do that too. So it really is that. I think it builds the trust and the bond and just, that's what I do. I mean, it's literally their time to discuss anything they want.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any specific things that you want to address at every weekly meeting? Not just, hey, let's just talk about whatever.
Well, so in large organizations, we have, things that get pushed down from the top or from different channels that affect the way we do business, either directly or indirectly. So the team meetings themselves, that's usually the forum that I would communicate that. Mm-hmm. Any of the other things is we do a little knowledge sharing, unusual environments that we're working in, different challenges that we overcome, or we collaborate in that way. And that to me has been extremely helpful too. So we'll, first half of our meeting, we go through the normal manager stuff, and the second half is all of that. We go around the table and we talk about what we're doing technically, and if anybody else can assist with maybe an unusual situation or a challenge, this is our time to get those out.
Mm-hmm. So we've been focusing a little bit on team mentorship. What about you're obviously customer facing?
Yes.
You've had different customers in different industries. Mm-hmm. What are some of the industries that you've worked in, and how have you had to talk to your customers in those industries? For example, for our audience, when you're in the military, you talk to the military, if you're a Marine, you're going to talk to a Marine in a very specific way, right? And if you're in the Air Force, you're going to talk to them in a very specific way, probably not as direct. Is there truth in that, you think?
Well, there's probably normal customs and courtesies, and I would agree with you there. Now, with respect to the different industries that I've worked across, it has been pretty much everything, .gov, .mil, retail, financial, energy, EDU, pretty much everyone you can think of. I can't think of an industry that I haven't, even .orgs, foreign and domestic. So there are, obviously the communication is first centered around building the relationship, right? So you've hired a vendor, you've paid for a service or a statement of work, and you're there to deliver it. And most conversation is around that. The other thing it's around is you're building a partnership with that customer, right? It's not just check the boxes on an SOW and go home. You forge a relationship and a partnership with that customer, and you avail yourself with them, hoping to forge. I mean, let's face it, especially in technology, there are so many, vendors out there and so much competition. And I've seen it where if you didn't come back around anytime before it was license renewal time, someone else came back in. So you have to care for those customers in between those cycles. You have to care for their outcomes. You have to, continue to cultivate that relationship.
Yeah, do you actually have relationship like communication outside of when you support them, maybe on site? Do they give you a ring and they ask for advice on anything?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it happened today, and I credit that to building that trusted advisor relationship with them, which I think that was the key to a lot of my success in the way I approached it. I wanted to be that trusted advisor. I wanted to deliver beyond their expectations, and obviously I wanted to represent the company the best I could as well.
So you've been in a customer-facing role, right? We've discussed that, and you've talked to the customers outside of, maybe your engagement because you've cultivated that relationship. I think it's probably safe to say that it's that same kind of communication and trust that you have to build with your organization and its stakeholders in order to get security done. I guess what I'm getting at is how do we do that with our own stakeholders when a cybersecurity or anything security operational related conversations deal with the two-letter word no? How do we change that? How do we change that culture and say, hey, yeah, we're trying to protect you guys, and the reason why we're saying no is because this and this and this, because for a non-technical person, they see cybersecurity, they say scary. We don't want to get breached, or that costs too much money. How do we get to that point of trusted advisor, trusted mentor?
Well, that, first of all, is a very good question, because that's what probably through all my years of professional services and customer-facing roles was the one thing that you have to constantly work on, right? It's always a new set of people at an organization as they change, or attrition. It's another new set of people when you go to another customer in another industry. So that is actually a very important thing, and probably the one thing that I tried to figure out, like, how do I build that sustained, lasting relationship? And it came down to me knowing what I was doing and delivering on my promises. I really, that was it. I didn't have to talk to the folks at the energy sector any different than I had to talk to, a company in East Bay. Or manufacturing. I just had to know my stuff. I had to be very good at it. If I didn't know, I had to find the answers. And you built that trust one opportunity at a time.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that your reputation precedes you wherever you go.
Well, thank you for that.
All right, so I appreciate your time today in talking to us a little bit about mentorship. If you had 10 seconds to say anything to our audience about mentorship, what would it be?
For the mentee, find that person. For the person doing the mentoring, it's a two-way relationship and it's mutually beneficial. I think it's a fantastic, it's value all the way around. So,
great. Thank you so much for your time.
Will, thank you for inviting me. Take care.
All right, see ya. And that wraps up this week's episode of DevSecLead. Make sure that you subscribe, and if you have any comments, or concerns, please shoot me an email, DevSecLead@gmail.com. Till next time, talk to you later.